Okay, part two, talking about style. I don't know where we let off because we had about three things that just happened. So, I believe the last thing we were discussing was how the Chinese martial arts came over and affected our understanding in this country, along with other sort of importations that you saw with Japanese arts and such. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when people started to study Asian martial arts in this country, you already had these structures, okay, that were assumed part and parcel. I don't know if I mentioned the boxer, but when you go into a boxing ring, there isn't any style per se, even though there are different styles of fighting characterized. Mexican fighters, a Mexican style, amateur style, Olympic, you know. But it's not a big rubric. It's not something that gets thrown around a lot, right? But when you go into a martial arts gym for the longest time, particularly, and even to this day, we still think in terms of style, and that's probably because of China's influence, okay, and how it came to this country and influenced our understanding about studying martial arts, okay. With that said, when we stylize something, we have to understand that a lot of that is not essential to what we're trying to accomplish. Because now we understand style is sort of a way to embellish, to take something, to make it our own, to become a family through the practice. Okay? So when somebody says, I study a style of martial arts, from a strictly combat perspective, it's a weakness because a style has characteristics which make it very easy to attack. All right? Obviously, it was very different in older times. It's not so different in these days, where if somebody starts to act in a stylized fashion, they give you information about what they're capable of. Okay? So be aware of that. Be aware of that term and understand it intelligently. Okay? Some of the other things that people use. Do you know how to fight? Okay, what does that mean? Okay? Now, strictly speaking, is fighting a part of martial arts? It's an interesting question because if you look at the study of martial arts, a lot of the history, when things were dependent exclusively on being up close and personal, okay, you had to practice with weapons and you didn't spar with weapons. Now, eventually there were ways of sparring with weapons that people used and did and things like that in fencing, things of that nature. But to this day, a lot of the things you practice with weapons you can't necessarily only relate to sparring, okay? Is fighting a part of martial arts? Yes. To know how to protect yourself, is it the same as fighting? Again, fighting means resisting physically, directly, okay? It means the ability to engage with another person at a sort of equal level, okay? And the reason for that is if you're not fighting with a person, you're either defeating them or they're defeating you, okay? So the idea that fighting is martial arts, again, you have to think this through a little bit. And one of the reasons a lot of martial arts skills have been co-opted by MMA is because people don't really understand the difference. Training hard and training with things like impact, realistically, etc., they don't necessarily involve fighting. Fighting is a part. Fighting teaches you to resist. Okay? It teaches you how to take a technique and force the technique. Okay? That's a good thing. It's part of martial arts. Okay? You can do that to a degree. Okay? You cannot do that against a knife necessarily. Okay? You cannot do that against multiple opponents necessarily. Okay? You cannot do that from certain positions that are advantageous based on realistic scenarios and evolving situations one might find themselves in. Okay? So, when people say, can you fight? You take a ranger guy, okay? An army ranger, the tough guys that fly in, okay? You take a Navy SEAL and a Green Beret and Delta Force guy, and you go and you put them in an MA gym. How do you think they're going to do? You take a weightlifter, big, strong. You put them in that same situation. How are they going to do? They're not trained to fight. Okay, they may do that training on their own. Okay, but there's nothing about those divisions, okay, that call for them to get into a ring and exchange fighting techniques with somebody, because fighting in a life and death situation is a very different circumstance. Okay? So, can they fight? They're very tough. They're very strong. They're very capable. Doesn't mean they can fight. Can they kill people? Yeah, they can kill people. Okay? Learning how to use martial arts to kill people and to protect yourself, it still is different. The reason people get this confused is because the people that purport to teach these things usually don't know what the hell they're doing. The reason for that is teachers over the years have learned that when you're dealing with people and you're putting them in a situation where they're trained to cause harm, they might let you down and get you in serious trouble. Okay? So very few people were taught how to use things in a way that is as deadly if a teacher knew to begin with. How do I know this? Well, if you look at all these martial arts that we practice, okay, let's go back to Chinese martial arts. Tai Chi was used on the battlefields. Now, do any of you think the Tai Chi that was used on the battlefields is the type of Tai Chi you see people doing in the park? The point I'm trying to make is that, I'll give you another example before I make my point. Judo from Jiu-Jitsu, okay? There was a whole campaign, that Kano's Judo was superior, but the fact of the matter is that Jiu-Jitsu was never really designed for the same purpose as Judo, okay? And all these arts had to be practiced in a manner where safety wasn't concerned. So, people who really live, learn, and understand how to use these techniques to cause serious harm are few and far between. I count myself as one of them. Spent over 40 years learning the martial arts, and I can tell you from experience that you have to be very careful about these things, even when you're practicing and learning. Okay? So we'll do one more video and call it a series, okay?